Hi, I'm Emma. Welcome to Hidden Finance. If you're earning more than ever but still feel like you're standing still, you're not alone. Here, we uncover the quiet systems shaping your money, income traps, rising costs, lifestyle inflation, and the hidden psychology that keeps even high earners feeling stuck. No hype, no shortcuts, just clear thinking and practical strategies that actually move the needle. If you're ready to stop reacting to money and start directing it, this is where we begin. Two boys once grew up under the same roof. Same parents, same neighborhood streets, same simple dinners around a small kitchen table. In the evenings, their father used to say something quietly while washing dishes. Life isn't about how much you earn, it's about what you do with what stays. At the time, the sentence sounded like ordinary parental advice, the kind that fades into the background of childhood. Years passed. The boys became men. Their lives unfolded almost like parallel stories. They studied similar subjects in college, entered similar careers. Even their salaries moved upward at nearly the same rhythm. By the time they reached their mid-30s, both appeared to be doing well. Decent homes, young families, careers that were finally gaining momentum. From the outside, there was no visible difference between their futures. But 3 decades later, the contrast between their lives became impossible to ignore. One brother wakes up at 65 with a quiet sense of calm. His house is fully paid for. His investments have grown into more than $1 million. The morning begins slowly with coffee and sunlight spilling across the floor. There is no urgency. Some winters he travels somewhere warm. Sometimes he helps a grandchild with tuition. Money is no longer a daily calculation. It has become something quiet and supportive in the background of life. Freedom has arrived almost gently. But the other brother begins his mornings very differently. His alarm rings early, not because he wants to wake up, because he still has to work. Retirement never quite worked out the way he imagined. His savings are small. His mortgage still has years left. Social Security covers only part of the monthly expenses, so several days a week, he works part-time at a hardware store, standing behind a counter, helping strangers find screws and paintbrushes. At night, another ritual appears. He lies awake in the dark doing arithmetic in his head. Can the medication be paid for this month? What happens if property taxes rise again? What if the car breaks down? The quiet anxiety never fully disappears. And the most confusing part of the story is this. Both men started from almost identical circumstances. Same upbringing, same opportunities, nearly identical incomes. The difference between their futures wasn't created by luck. It wasn't intelligence either. The separation happened somewhere else. And strangely, it didn't happen in their 20s. During that decade, most people are simply trying to survive adulthood, paying rent, switching jobs, learning what they are capable of. It didn't happen in their 30s either. That decade is usually consumed by building families and careers at the same time. No, the quiet split between these two lives happened during a much less obvious period, their 40s. Not through dramatic events, but through small decisions that felt harmless. A slightly bigger house, a more expensive car after a promotion, vacations that slowly grew more elaborate each year. Each decision seemed reasonable, each one felt deserved, yet together, those ordinary choices began shaping two completely different futures. One brother slowly became a collector of freedom, the other quietly became a prisoner of appearances. And the unsettling truth is this: most people never realize their 40s are quietly deciding their retirement while they are living through them. Because nothing feels dramatic while it's happening. It simply feels like life moving forward. Which leads to a deeper question. What invisible forces make the 40s the most powerful financial decade of an entire life?
The 40s arrive quietly. There are no celebrations when they begin, no dramatic announcements that life has entered its most financially important chapter. Yet something unusual is happening beneath the surface during this decade. 3 powerful forces suddenly align, and they rarely appear together again. The first force is income. For many professionals, earnings reach their highest levels somewhere between the early 40s and mid-50s. Years of experience finally begin paying off. Promotions accumulate. Skills become valuable. Confidence grows. The raises may no longer feel dramatic, but the paychecks have never been larger. For the first time, there is real financial material available to build wealth. The second force is time. At 40, there are often 20 to 25 years remaining before traditional retirement. In the world of investing, that amount of time is powerful. Historically, money invested in diversified markets has the potential to multiply several times over that period. A dollar invested around age 40 can grow into 4 by retirement. But something important happens as the years pass. The multiplier begins shrinking. At 50, there may be only 15 years left. At 55, perhaps 10. The engine of compounding slows dramatically. Money invested later simply has less time to grow. This means the dollars invested during the early 40s carry a disproportionate impact on the future. A dollar invested at 42 works far harder than the same dollar invested at 52. But there is a third force completing the equation. Expenses begin to stabilize. During the 30s, life often feels like a constant expansion of costs. Children arrive, homes are purchased, careers require constant adjustments. Everything seems to grow at the same time. By the 40s, something subtle changes. Furniture has already been bought. Homes begin to feel manageable within the budget. Children slowly become more independent. For the first time in years, a small financial margin appears. Not enormous, but meaningful. And this is where the invisible fork in the road appears, because that margin can travel in 2 completely different directions. Some households quietly send it toward investments. Retirement accounts begin growing steadily in the background. Others allow that margin to be absorbed by lifestyle expansion. The larger home that feels like a reward for success. The luxury vehicle that replaces the reliable one. Vacations that grow increasingly extravagant. None of these choices feel irresponsible. In fact, many of them feel completely justified. After 20 years of working, the desire to finally live well feels natural. But mathematics is indifferent to emotion. When saving slows during the 40s, something invisible disappears. The most powerful years for compounding quietly vanish. Imagine someone reaching 40 with $100,000 already invested. If 15% of income continues flowing into investments each year, that portfolio might grow to more than $1.3 million by retirement. But if saving slows during the 40s and increases only later, the outcome can fall hundreds of thousands of dollars short. Even aggressive saving later struggles to replace what time has already taken away, because time is the one financial asset that cannot be recovered. Which leads to a quiet realization. The difference between financial freedom and financial anxiety rarely begins with income. It begins with how people respond to the invisible pressure that arrives during their peak earning years. A pressure that whispers the same question to almost everyone. After all these years of working, isn't it finally time to upgrade your life? Somewhere in the middle of life, a strange pressure begins to appear. It rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it shows up in quiet comparisons. A neighbor renovates their kitchen. A colleague arrives at work in a luxury SUV. A friend casually mentions a second home near the lake. None of these moments feel like financial decisions. They feel like signals. Signals about success. Signals about status. Signals about what a successful life is supposed to look like. And during the 40s, those signals grow louder. Careers have matured. Income has improved. After 20 years of effort, the idea of finally enjoying the rewards feels completely justified. This is the moment when many people begin expanding their lifestyle. A slightly larger house, a more prestigious car, vacations that slowly become more extravagant. Each decision seems harmless. After all, the monthly payments appear manageable. The income is higher than it has ever been. What could possibly go wrong? But hidden behind these comfortable choices is a quiet mathematical consequence. Consider the decision to upgrade a home.
A family living comfortably in a $350,000 house decides to move into a $600,000 one. The children need more space, they say, and after years of hard work, the upgrade feels deserved. The monthly cost rises by about $1,500 or $2,000. At first, it seems small relative to the household income, but that $2,000 each month represents $24,000 per year that will never be invested. Over 25 years, that money could have quietly grown into nearly $1 million. A house upgrade often costs something people rarely calculate: their future freedom. The same pattern appears in smaller places too. Cars, for example. Replacing two reliable vehicles with two luxury ones may increase payments, insurance, and maintenance by several $100s a month. Over time, that difference can quietly erase hundreds of thousands of dollars from future retirement wealth. None of these choices look reckless. In fact, they often look like progress. But slowly, something strange begins to happen. The symbols of success start demanding maintenance. The larger house requires larger payments. The luxury cars require larger insurance. The lifestyle quietly expands until the margin disappears. And this is where a subtle psychological shift occurs. The person no longer feels wealthier. They feel obligated. Income rises, but freedom does not. The lifestyle must now be maintained. The impressive house becomes a quiet financial anchor. The expensive car becomes another monthly responsibility. Success begins to resemble a cage. Meanwhile, another type of person exists in the same world. Someone who quietly resists these signals. Someone who chooses not to expand every time income rises. This person often appears ordinary, sometimes even behind their peers. Their house looks modest. Their car looks practical. Their vacations are simpler. But beneath that modest surface, something very different is happening. Money that could have been spent on appearances is quietly being transformed into future freedom. Two people may walk through the same decade. One becomes a prisoner of visible success. The other becomes an architect of invisible freedom. And the difference between them is rarely obvious in the moment. It only becomes visible decades later. Which raises another uncomfortable question. If lifestyle expansion quietly steals the most powerful years of compounding, why do so many intelligent people still fall into the trap? To understand how these decisions accumulate, imagine two families standing at the same point in life. Both are in their early 40s. Both have spent years working hard, raising children, and slowly building financial stability. On paper, their lives look almost identical. The first family, Daniel and Laura. By age 40, they have built a respectable foundation. Their retirement accounts hold about $180,000. Their home is modest but comfortable. Two children are entering their teenage years. Their combined income is strong, around $160,000 a year. One evening, Daniel brings home an idea. A new housing development has opened nearby. Larger homes, better schools, a neighborhood where many of their colleagues already live. Laura hesitates at first. The price is much higher, but the monthly payment seems manageable. And after years of working hard, the idea of upgrading feels reasonable. They make the move. The new mortgage increases their monthly expenses by about $1,600. To compensate, retirement contributions are temporarily reduced, just for a few years, they promise themselves. But life rarely pauses. Soon, Daniel's car begins having problems. Instead of repairing it, they replace it with a newer, more luxurious model. A year later, Laura does the same. The children enter high school. Sports training, tutoring, college preparation, the costs quietly rise. When their daughter chooses an expensive out-of-state university, the parents take a large loan rather than pushing her toward a cheaper option. None of these decisions feel irresponsible. Each one feels like good parenting or well-earned comfort. 10 years pass. By 50, Daniel and Laura look successful from the outside. Beautiful home, nice cars, children heading to college. But when they check their retirement accounts, the number is unsettling. $240,000. Only slightly more than what they had a decade earlier. Now consider another family, Michael and Anna. At 40, their numbers look almost the same. income around $155,000, retirement savings around $165,000, two children of similar age. They face the same temptation, a larger house in a nicer neighborhood. Michael is excited about the idea, but Anna studies the numbers more carefully. The extra mortgage payment would cost nearly $1,600 a month. Instead of moving, they stay. At first, it feels like a sacrifice, but the money that would have gone into a bigger mortgage begins flowing somewhere else. Investments, every single month. When Michael's car needs replacing, they buy a reliable used vehicle. When college arrives, they have honest conversations with their children about costs. Scholarships and state universities become part of the plan. During their 40s, Michael and Anna sometimes feel out of sync with their peers. Their lifestyle appears smaller, less impressive. But beneath that surface, something powerful is happening. Their investments are growing quietly. By 50, their retirement accounts hold more than $550,000. 10 years later, the difference between the two families becomes impossible to ignore. One family spent a decade expanding their lifestyle. The other spent a decade expanding their freedom. And the most surprising part of the story is this. During their 40s, both families felt equally satisfied with their lives. The difference only occurred later, which leads to a deeper realization. If lifestyle upgrades rarely bring lasting happiness, what exactly are people really chasing when they spend their most powerful decade trying to look successful?
By the time people reach their 40s, a quiet belief begins to grow. A belief that sounds completely reasonable. After 20 years of working, struggling, sacrificing, and slowly climbing the ladder, surely it is finally time to enjoy life. The thought feels natural, even justified. Careers are demanding. Stress has been constant. For many, the 40s represent the first time income truly feels comfortable. So the mind begins telling a quiet story. We have earned this. The larger home feels like proof of progress. The luxury car feels like a reward for endurance. The expensive vacation feels like reclaiming time lost to years of hard work. But there is a psychological illusion hidden inside that feeling. Humans adapt extremely quickly. The excitement of a new house rarely lasts more than a year or two. The luxury car that once felt thrilling slowly becomes just another car parked in the driveway. The kitchen renovation that once impressed guests eventually fades into the background of everyday life. What once felt extraordinary becomes ordinary. Research repeatedly shows that lifestyle upgrades increase happiness only temporarily, often for about 18 to 24 months. Then the brain resets. The new normal becomes normal. But the financial consequences remain permanently. The larger mortgage continues for decades. The expensive vehicles still require payments, insurance, and maintenance. The expanded lifestyle quietly absorbs every dollar of rising income. The person who once hoped success would create freedom discovers something unexpected instead. Success has created responsibility. The lifestyle now requires maintenance. And this is where a subtle transformation begins. Instead of working because they want to, many people begin working because they must. The house must be paid for, the cars must be maintained, the lifestyle must be preserved. Without noticing, the person becomes what could be called a prisoner of visible success. The symbols of prosperity are everywhere. Yet freedom is strangely absent. Meanwhile, another kind of gratification exists, one that rarely appears impressive in the moment. The person who quietly resists lifestyle expansion during their 40s often feels something different. Their house may look ordinary, their car may look practical, but every year their investments quietly grow. Every year their future options quietly expand. What they are really buying is not status. They're buying time. Time to retire earlier, time to travel freely, time to say no to work that no longer matters.
The uncomfortable truth is simple. The pleasure of lifestyle inflation lasts 2 or 3 years. The consequences can last 30. And the discipline required to resist it often lasts only a decade. Which leads to one final question. What kind of life is actually waiting on the other side of those decisions?
Imagine a quiet morning many years from now. You are 70 years old. The house is silent. Sunlight slowly fills the room while the world outside is still waking up. In one version of this future, the morning feels peaceful. There is no urgency. Coffee is poured slowly while thinking about where to travel next month. Perhaps a visit to see grandchildren. Perhaps a long trip somewhere that once felt too far away. Unexpected expenses are not frightening. A broken appliance, a medical bill, a sudden opportunity to help family. These things are inconveniences, not disasters. Life feels open. Now imagine another version of that same morning. The house is still quiet, but the feeling is very different. The mind immediately begins calculating. Will this month's Social Security check cover the medication? What happens if property taxes rise again? What if the car needs repairs? Instead of planning trips, the mind plans survival. Instead of freedom, there is uncertainty. What makes these two futures unsettling is that they are not determined by luck. They are rarely determined by income either. Both futures often begin with similar people living similar lives. The difference usually begins decades earlier, inside the quiet decisions made during one particular decade, the 40s, a decade when income is high, time for compounding still exists, and expenses finally stabilize enough to create room for choice. Some people allow that room to disappear into lifestyle expansion. Others quietly convert it into investments. One path creates the appearance of success. The other creates the reality of freedom. And the strange thing about these two paths is that they often feel almost identical while they are happening. Both families feel happy, both enjoy their lives. The difference only appears decades later, which means the real question is not about retirement. The real question is much simpler. When the 40s arrive, what kind of future are those years quietly building? Because the decade will pass regardless. The only thing that changes is the life waiting on the other side of it. There is something strangely liberating about understanding the truth of the 40s, because once the illusion disappears, the decade stops feeling like a trap. It begins to look like an opportunity, not an opportunity to impress anyone, but an opportunity to quietly redesign the rest of life. The most powerful shift begins with a simple realization. Money in the 40s is not just money, it is compressed time. Every dollar invested during this decade has 20 to 25 years to grow. It works quietly in the background while life continues moving forward. That means a small decision made at 42 can echo all the way into 70. This is why the 40s are not about perfection, they are about direction. The first quiet shift many people make during this decade is redefining what enough actually means. For years, success may have been measured by visible upgrades, bigger homes, newer cars, vacations that look impressive in photographs. But slowly, another definition begins to appear. Enough becomes a house that supports life rather than advertising it. Enough becomes a car that reliably takes a family where they need to go. Enough becomes a lifestyle that leaves space, financial and emotional, for the future. This shift is not about deprivation. It is about clarity. Because every dollar that is not consumed by lifestyle inflation becomes a small worker quietly building freedom. The second shift involves automation. Human motivation is unreliable. Good intentions fade when life becomes busy. The people who navigate their 40s successfully rarely rely on willpower alone. Instead, they design systems. Retirement contributions move automatically from income to investments. Each raise quietly increases savings before lifestyle has a chance to expand. The money disappears before it can be spent. And over time, those invisible contributions accumulate into something powerful. What once felt like small monthly deposits eventually become hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The third shift involves courage, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet courage to ignore social pressure. During the 40s, comparison becomes one of the most expensive habits in modern life. Neighbors renovate kitchens, colleagues upgrade vehicles, friends post photographs of expensive vacations. These signals are everywhere. They whisper a dangerous idea: everyone else is moving forward. But most of those signals are illusions. Many of the lives that look wealthy from the outside are actually balanced on fragile financial structures. Large mortgages, heavy debt, dependence on continued high income. The person who quietly resists those signals may feel temporarily behind, but something strange happens over time. Freedom compounds faster than status. While others must continue working to maintain appearances, the disciplined saver begins to accumulate options. Options to change careers, options to work less, options to walk away from environments that no longer feel meaningful, and options, eventually, to stop working entirely. This is the hidden reward of the 40s. The decade that appears ordinary from the outside quietly determines the architecture of the next 30 years. And perhaps the most surprising discovery is this: the people who resist lifestyle inflation during their 40s do not usually feel deprived. Research repeatedly shows that happiness stabilizes after basic needs and moderate comfort are met. Beyond that point, additional spending rarely produces lasting satisfaction. What actually increases happiness is something far simpler: control over time, freedom from financial anxiety, the ability to wake up without needing to calculate survival. In other words, the real reward of financial discipline is not money. It is peace. Which brings the story back to the quiet image from earlier. A 70-year-old sitting in a peaceful home on a calm morning, coffee warming the hands, sunlight entering slowly through the window. In that moment, the most important financial decisions are already decades behind. They were made quietly, during a decade that felt completely ordinary. A decade filled with small choices about homes, cars, savings, and priorities. The 40s, a decade that most people underestimate, yet one that quietly decides whether the final chapters of life are filled with pressure or with freedom.